Hi and welcome to Retribution Paladin Theatre with another logs analysis. I've got two on my plate at the moment. I've sort of done two. This is going to be the first of them. Then I've got another one that's going to come out a bit later today. So what we've got here is in many ways an ideal one. They've sent me a link to the logs. They've given me a specific problem to look at and even a link to what should have been a video of gameplay, which is even better because then I can do a full-on one of it. Unfortunately, when I tried to download the video of the gameplay, I was having a bit of an issue at the time. I can't remember where I was doing it on what computer, but it looked like it wanted to take hours over it. I thought, well, this can't be right. I'll leave it till later, and then I forgot. And I'm not sure what language it's in, some Scandinavian language, but whatever it is, I think I can probably work out here that it's only available for 7 days, which is certainly not available at the moment. But it's fine. In terms of the problem I had to solve, I've been able to do it. I've been able to look through the logs and find some definite points for improvement. So hopefully it will be of use. And as I say, there will be another set of logs that was given to me recently to look at later today as well. So what we're going to have to do is look at the logs. I'm going to, straight away, of course, there's certain things come into mind when you can't close to another paladin. It's not always something to worry about. So we're going to look at Tichondrius to begin with. So we'll have a look. So this is the paladin of interest here, and this is the guy you want to match the damage on. So we look at the obvious things, that you're a little behind in item level. It's not necessarily a disaster. Let's have a look. Gear. So you had the two Bis legendaries, can't be bad. What did they have? They had Belt and Liadrin's Fury and Leash, which isn't bad, but it's not as good as, say, having the cloak. So you have the edge there. If we have a look at your trinkets, you've got Convergence of Fates. I would very strongly advise against taking Convergence of Fates on this fight. The reason is Convergence of Fates obviously gives you a chance at having shorter cooldown effectively on Crusade. Now, there are one of two situations when you want to use this. The first of which is if you want to get more Crusades out of the fight. That's very RNG because it depends very much on what the fight length is. If you know exactly what the fight length is going to be, then on a lot of fights, okay, you can work out whether or not you are likely to get that. Because if you don't get an extra use out of it, well, you're not getting any extra damage out of it. But there is a second purpose, and that is to allow you to use it at more convenient times. Maybe the time that Crusade naturally comes back off cooldown isn't the best time to be using it, because during that time, let's say on Croesus, for example, you know, the 2-minute mark falls naturally to a point where you're going to have to go out for Burning Pitch. It's not brilliant. Maybe you can get a more convenient use out of it then. On this fight, that's not happening. You want to save this for specific points of the fight. Now, most people want to save their cooldowns for just after the bat phase, because that's when you've got your orb and you've got a damage buff. And you always want to lump damage buffs together. So you want to use Crusade at that same time to maximize its benefit. The only other time to sensibly use Crusade would be during the bat phase itself if you're going to be blowing up the bats. Now, I haven't checked yet which one that applies to you, but in either case, you don't want a Convergence of Fates, because Crusade naturally comes off cooldown before the bat phase anyway. So you always have it up for both of those periods of time. You're going to hold on to it. So if you're using Crusade as soon as it comes off cooldown, which is generally what you want to do with Convergence, then you're not using it at the right time. So I would definitely suggest that you use a different trinket. Now, the other trinket you've got is Claw the Crystalline Scorpion. That's fine. Now, your friend here's got Eye of Command, which is obviously going to be decent for the boss phase part of Tichondrius. Not so good for the ads, but it is good for the boss part of it. And if your focus is on the boss rather than the ads, if you think the bats are fine, then that's a perfectly good trinket to take on that fight. You're just going to be, you know, wasting it on the bat phase. That's okay. So what we can see is there is a definite disparity between the two here. Obviously, this is just one fight. This is a snapshot, but it's the one I was shown. So we'll go off this one. Now, what I'm going to do here is to look at the damage breakdown. The three mobs of interest to me, Tichondrius and the bats, are obviously the two that you need to be focusing on. But there is another one as well. So what? Oh, well, I'll go to the right thing. All enemies. So let's look at Tichondrius first of all. So this is where there is a significant gap between your damage and your friend's damage there. They're doing significantly more damage on Tichondrius than you are. This is where their Eye of Command will be most beneficial. So we'll have a look at that in a moment. Let's look at the bats. Now you're doing a little more damage on the bats than your friend is there. Again, their Eye of Command will be letting them down at that point. But then your Convergence of Fates is letting you down all through the fight, if we're honest. And now the Tainted Blood. Ooh. So, straight away we can see there's a significant amount of extra damage being done on the Tainted Bloods by your friend. This is probably a bit sneaky. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to hover over this name and have a look. And sure enough, what do we see? Okay, there's a certain amount of damage done by Divine Hammer. So it's sort of looking, I'm not checking yet, but it's looking like you're sort of stacking the bloods on the boss. Which is, some people do that. We don't in our guild personally, but some people do that. So you obviously can't help some Divine Hammer damage because you would take Divine Hammer, obvious talent to take. But those Divine Storms should not be happening. Those Divine Storms are pure padding. So if we have a look at yours, you're not using Divine Storm. So you're actually doing it right. You are not padding on the ads, your friend is. So part of the difference can be said to be down to that. Now if we have a look how much difference that is. So you've done about 60. All of this is wasted damage effect. I don't know exactly how you're doing it, but it's wasted damage because while they're on the boss, they're healing up anyway. So we're talking about, what, 27-ish million damage extra. So if we get rid of that, how much damage extra they do? It's not going to account for all of it, of course, this. So you're still about 30. So really what you are is about 30 million damage behind, not the sort of 54 it looks like, or because 27 million of that damage they did by cheesing. And that wasn't actually helpful. They'd have done better to have used Templars of It on the boss and got the boss down a little bit quicker. So that's one thing there. So the next thing we're going to have a check at are when Crusade was used for each of you. So, Crusade. So you both used it at the start. That matches up. Now, difference here. So here we've got a situation where you have used it when it's become available because of your Convergence of Fates, which is a bit of a waste because you're just using it on Tichondrius for most of that, if not all of that. Actually, the bats, I suppose, would be here at this point. Your friend is probably using it while he's got up the buff from Tichondrius, so we can look at that a bit more clearly now. So it looks like about there. So there-ish. Click on your friend, click on buffs again for that period of time. We can see that Crusade, so this is the point at which that buff's active. So they've got, that's when they're firing off their Crusade. Because they've got a damage buff. And you will have used yours, so you don't have Crusade at the time. So you're then using it later on in that same phase. Your orb buff has faded off by then. So again, you're using it at a period of time when it's of no use to you. On Tichondrius, as I say, there's 2 times you want to use Crusade, and I'll give you the reasons. One is on the bat phase, if it is your job to blow up bats. If it's not your job to blow up bats, there is a DPS chuck and Tichondrius shouldn't use it then. But if you do use Crusade, because it is your job to blow up bats, well, you're obviously going to kill a load more bats a lot more quickly. That is to the benefit of everyone, because the faster bats die, the quicker the next wave comes in, and that wave's larger, and then that dies, and the next wave comes in, and you end up with more and more orbs. But also, for your personal damage, it's good, because it means that as long as you can actually maximize your AoE damage rotation, and sometimes that's hampered by position of other people, especially with Brands of Argus, then it means your overall damage goes up as well. But if that's not your job, that's not what you do. So then what you should do is use Crusade after the bat phase when you have got that orb buff for the boss. And you're not using it in either case. You're losing a lot of damage. I cannot emphasize to you how strongly you are gimping yourself by doing that. So number one thing is I would say that, and I would sort of leave it at that. But I am going to look at one other thing as well. And that is, let's go back to that period of Crusade again, right at the start. So all abilities C for Crusade. So let's have a look at the damage of each of you during that initial period. And you fall way behind at the start of the fight again. Now, there's a couple of potential reasons for this. One is that you are behind an item level. I mean, it's only 4, but, you know, it is behind. The other reason is that during Crusade, they might be expected to do a little bit more because they have got both the legendaries which improve their performance during Crusade, and also the trinket that they've got. I always forget the name of it. It's the one from Karazhan. I have command, that's it. I always forget it because I don't have it myself. That's also going to be really good for that period of time as well. Whereas in your case, your legendaries are bis in general, and they're both very good for this phase. But Whisper of the Nathrezim is not necessarily as good as Liadrin's Fury Unleash during this specific period, over the course of the fight is. And of course, your trinkets, well, Claw of the Crystalline Sculpted, you're on just one boss. It's not ideal for that situation. And also, Convergence of Fates is doing nothing for you during that specific period other than giving you some strength. But let's just see if there's any other things as well. So I'm going to click on casts. Now let's have a look at you. Oh, what a timeline. So you've got Divine Hammer. So there's it looks like have you cast that? I can't see the cast of it. So that implies you pre-cast it, which is good. So then you've gone in. Now here's an issue. So you've done Judgment and Crusade at the same time. That's sort of okay. But you're not ready to spend. So here's you using Crusader Strike. Crusade needs to stack up. In order for you to maximize the damage from Crusade, you need to stack it up as quickly as possible. That means as soon as you cast it, you need to be spending. You're not spending for a couple of seconds later because you're activating this and then you're having to build another Holy Power before you can spend. So you should have hit this before Crusade. Crusade's doing no use to you unless you can spend immediately. But then you've done that. I mean, the rest of it sort of looks okay. Oh, although there's a big gap there between spenders, which suggests to me that you're losing your cloak buff. Now, of course, you can't always maintain your cloak buff, but where possible you should. Like here, for example, like you've wakes, you had 5 there, spent. Another one there, spent, so you had 0. And then 2 plus 1. Well, you could have spent here, and you didn't. You've carried on building Judge before you've spent. So you will have lost your cloak buff there. And we'll be able to see that. There's that break where you lost it, and you lost it again there. Now, as I say, if you can't help it, then that's one thing. But if you can, if you could spend, then you should have done to maintain that. Remember, Whisper of the Nathrezim doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything for your Templar's Verdicts unless you've only just cast one a few seconds before. So what I would say in general, without going into any more detail, is you've got to maximize the damage you do with your Crusade, and that is based around 2 things. First of all, making sure that you don't cast Crusade until you can spend. You must spend immediately after it, even at the start. Secondly, for the purposes of keeping your cloak buff up, make sure that you spend when you can, so to maintain that cloak buff as long as possible. Don't go for more than 2 global cooldowns without spending if you can help it. If you can't help it, you can't help it. And then you've also got to use Crusade at the right times. You've got to carefully consider when you use it. And for this fight, Convergence of Fates is not doing you any favours at all. If you've got any other trinket of the same item level or even close to it will be better. A stat stick would be better. Something like Horn of Valor or Faulty Countermeasure would work as well. In fact, that would work very well. Horn of Valor probably better if you're going to use it on the bats. Faulty Countermeasure better. I mean, assuming you got both at the same item level, most people don't. But if you had a choice, if you were going to use your Crusade on the boss. So I hope you found that useful as always. If you did, don't forget to subscribe for further content. Don't forget that next weekend will be the live Ret Q&A ahead of 7.2.5 coming out. Details of that, just keep following me on YouTube or Twitch. Twitch address just there. And until next time, I'll see you later.